Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it's war between the EU and the UK, and the weapons being used in this Brexit battle? PowerPoint slides. No one got harmed. Our reporter Adam Fleming's been caught in the crossfire, but looking pretty healthy, even as a result. Take us through some of these slide highlights, then, in this battle between the EU and the UK.
Yeah, Joe, I've been absolutely loving it. My Brexit ring binders are bulging at the prospect. So the European Commission, they love a PowerPoint presentation. It's what they do. They live and breathe it. They've kind of made it their trademark. So what's been happening now is that the UK's been fighting back with its own series of slides, a deluge of documents. So I'll talk you through some of the highlights as you asked. So the first one that we got this week was a presentation from the UK negotiators to the EU negotiators about cooperation on data, which is a big thing that David Davis is obsessed about. It's like the oil of the modern economy. That's the sort of phrase he uses to describe it. And so the UK was just setting out how closely they want to mirror the new EU data protection rules, which are coming into force this week, actually. And so they did a presentation talking about that. And one of the things that was in that presentation is something that's common to nearly all of the ones that the Brits have been doing, which is that they take a load of comments made by the Prime Minister in various speeches and press conferences on one side, and then compare it with comments made by senior EU figures like Jean-Claude Juncker or Donald Tusk, or sections of the EU's own guidelines, to show where there is a meeting of minds, to try and do a little bit of encouragement of consensus. Then the next slides pack that we got was about collaboration on research and innovation. So the successor to the Horizon 2020 programme, for example, where the EU dishes out funds to university researchers. We got a big presentation about how hunky-dory and friendly everyone's going to be on that in the future. And at the bottom of one of the slides there, hopefully you can see it and you could look at it with your opera glasses, it says that the UK will respect the remit of the European Court of Justice when it comes to those EU programmes. Some people saying that's an extension of the UK's acceptance of the ECJ. The UK government saying, nope, it's just what the Prime Minister has been saying for a while now, that the UK is prepared to recognise the role of the ECJ in some limited circumstances. Then, last night, I managed to obtain a set of presentations that were given by the UK to the EU yesterday. They haven't actually been published yet, but I can reveal them to the world now. One of them was about cooperation on crime and security after Brexit. And so what the UK has done here is that they've done a big table looking at 30 plus justice and home affairs measures, from the European arrest warrant to measures for preventing football hooliganism. And they have done an analysis of what the UK and the EU would lose if the UK was treated just like any other third country outside the EU. So obviously that's applying a bit of pressure to the EU, saying, if you take a really strict approach with us, then look at how these law enforcement capabilities will be lost. Now, of course, Mr. Barnier can't be silent in all of this. They issued a slide of their own this week that caused some ripples. Let's have a look at that. That was about customs, and as with all Michel Barnier's slides, it's gloriously colour-coded. What's going on here is that this is the EU trying to say, look, if you decide to stay in the customs union or a customs union, it only removes a couple of checks that have to be done at the border. All these other checks remain. For example, on things like, is this a piece of kitchenware coming from China where we're worried that it might have carcinogenic chemicals in it? So some people saying that was a pretty obvious bit of propaganda by the EU trying to intervene in the British political debate, which is about all this stuff right now. The EU say, nope, this was a slide for internal purposes, just to educate the member states about some of the issues they have to think about in Brexit, and they're just being transparent and letting the rest of us see it. But it is fair to say this is battle by PowerPoint, and that's just a little insight into some of the crossfire that's been going on.
That's just a little insight. Well, I'm impressed by that summary. We all love a slideshow, of course. That is our slide correspondent and expert, Adam Fleming, there in Brussels. Thank you. Talking of Brexit, Jeremy Corbyn has been in Belfast today, where he's addressed the issue of the Irish border. Here's a little of what he had to say.
Labour will not support any Brexit deal that includes a return to a hard border on this island. We are also clear there must be no effective border created in the Irish Sea either. That is why Labour has put forward a plan that would go a long way to solving this issue, a plan for which I believe there is a majority in Westminster. By negotiating a new and comprehensive customs union with the EU, which includes a British say in future trade deals, we can ensure trade on this island stays frictionless and free-flowing.
How many times have we heard that? Jeremy Corbyn there. Well, we asked for an interview with someone from Labour's frontbench team about Jeremy Corbyn's speech, but none of their 126 frontbenchers, yes, we counted them, were available today to talk about it. But we are joined now from Liverpool by the Labour activist Jasmine Beckett, and here in the studio by the businessman John Mills. He chaired Labour Leave. Welcome to both of you. Jasmine, tell us exactly what you want Labour's Brexit policy to be.
So I'm a part of a campaign called Labour Say, and we want to give our Labour Party members a vote on what our Brexit policy should be. 80% of our Labour members have said that they would like to remain within the single market, and I believe that that is best for working people and in fitting with Labour values to maintain single market membership.
Hasn't the argument moved on, though? We just heard Jeremy Corbyn there again talking about the customs union, but Labour have decided that the UK is to come out of the single market.
Yeah, I mean, it was a welcome U-turn on the customs union, but we are waiting to hear that on the single market membership. Now, we know that Labour members do not support coming out of the single market, and that is why we want to, with the Labour Say campaign, we want to empower members to allow them to have a say and tell Jeremy Corbyn exactly what they think Brexit should look like.
And when would you like this vote to be? How should it be done?
So we've got our annual conference in September, and that is how we make our policy, and we are obviously a member-led movement, and we believe that our members should have a say at that conference.
Right, Jasmine, stay with us. John, well, she's right, isn't she? I mean, Jeremy Corbyn talks about democracy and allowing the members to have a say, the majority of them back staying in the single market. Shouldn't they be allowed to voice that?
Well, we had a referendum on what our relationship was going to be with the European Union in 2016. And we were told by the government at the time that the Parliament would respect the results of that referendum. We then had MPs by a very large majority agreeing to trigger Article 50, and they were all elected on the 2016 general election on the basis, or nearly all of them, that they were going to respect the result of the referendum and go ahead with Brexit. And now they all want to reverse it. I mean, what is democracy about if it's not taking a decision and then implementing it?
Right. What do you feel about the Labour Party saying that we should stay in a customs union? Are you in favour of that? Well,
I think if you're in a customs union, then you're effectively in the single market anyway, because the two overlap very substantially.
So you think they've pretty well betrayed people on that, then, the Labour Party?
Well, I think that what we ought to be doing is coming out of the customs union and the single market, and then negotiating a free trade deal along the Canadian lines.
Right.
I think that would keep most people happy.
I mean, Jasmine, it's true, the referendum has happened. The people had their say, and 17.4 million of them said we should leave. And that meant, in many people's minds, most people's minds, leaving the single market and the customs union. It's too late to reverse that now, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're not suggesting that. You know, we are trying to get the best deal out of Brexit. We should not be sleepwalking into a hard Brexit where Theresa May and Boris Johnson are at the helm of that. It was a vote, but it was not, the single market and the customs union was not on the ballot paper, and I don't believe that people voted to leave that.
John?
Well, there were endless statements made during the referendum period about what coming out of the EU was going to entail, and this entailed coming out of the customs union and the single market. So I think the situation in that respect is really clear. But to be in the single market and the customs union, but not in the European Union, and therefore having no say in the way the whole operation develops, seems to me to be the worst of all possible worlds.
And do you think that Labour Party members should be given a vote on this? Bearing in mind, most of them are Remainers or certainly tilting that way. Do you think Jeremy Corbyn should do it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the Labour Party has a democratic process, and the Labour Party conference is the place where this is done. But I assume that Jasmine and her friends are going to do that. And we do have these very vigorous debates inside the Labour Party. But I want to say to John that it's really a little bit unfair to say we live in a democracy. We actually live in a parliamentary democracy. Referendums are not things that we are used to. I think the decision to call a referendum was a catastrophic error on the behalf of David Cameron. But we live in a parliamentary, it's our parliamentary representatives. And by the way, you know, we fought civil wars and died in order to have a parliament that would decide on these things. If our parliamentary system cannot sort out the terms on this deal and do it properly, only then, I think, should it go out to the public. But really, I want the British Parliament to sort this out.
I think the problem here is that there is a large majority in the Labour Party in favour of Remain. There's probably a majority in the Conservative Party in favour of Remain as well, but 52% of the country took a different view. The problem is that the party system doesn't represent at all, effectively, the sort of choices that people wanted to make about Europe.
But the thing is, they didn't vote for a Boris Johnson or a Jacob Rees-Mogg type leave, which is really just going to put us into the pocket of Donald Trump and is going to align us with the far right of the Republican Party in the United States. They didn't vote for that. They voted for greater autonomy over money and borders and so on.
It all overlaps.
Right, we're going to have to end it there, but John Mills and Jasmine Beckett, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.